Hi everyone, I'm Ed, and our topic was the impact of global tech companies. I wonder why I was talking on this topic. So the overall context, I think, was going to be useful before we cracked on, just to get some definitions. So we're talking about companies like Apple and Google, obviously, and where Apple and Google and the other technology companies are embedded in other applications, because there's an awful lot of that goes on. But we also included in our discussions things like OpenStreetMap, which are global platforms that are not necessarily driven by a commercial company, but we thought, you know, it's a technology platform, it's global, we should include that in our conversation, and have had a big impact. We then looked at, you know, for the overall perspective, actually we thought they've done quite a good job. You know, we're in a better position now because of the global technology companies and platforms than we would have been if they hadn't existed. We have, without question, maps are more important and more widely used in everyone's day-to-day lives than have ever been at any point in history, largely because of global technology companies. We have the blue dot. That means that fundamentally we will never get lost as we wander around the world with our devices that we carry around in our pockets. We have vertical imagery of the whole planet at 50 centimeter resolution that's updated reasonably frequently. We have terrestrial imagery of cities around the world that give us a sense of place that wasn't available previously. And interesting, I think, related to Nick's point about, you know, what is a map? Navigation now is so much of a predominant use case in what the global technology companies offer us. The actual connection to the underlying map has become disconnected in some ways. Perhaps we don't think when we're following driving directions or directions for walking between two locations that there actually is a map involved at all, because we just get turn left, turn right, and so on and so forth. So that gives us a context. Let's think about the actual talking points about what the impact is and how it impacts our lives as individuals or as companies. In some ways, they have set a basement. They've set a base capability that now sets the expectations for everyone. So the question of, well, I can do that in Google Maps, so then you have to add more than what Google Maps can offer. There has to be a differentiator. There has to be something that makes you different to these global platforms. And that might be, you know, specialisms, it might be about particular geographies and so on. But it kind of sets that base level that everyone measures you against. And there's an element of keeping up with the Joneses. I have to be able to do at least what these guys do. So it's a starting point. It also means that there's a capability that just didn't exist previously. And this comes from a number of different perspectives. There's the ability to clearly embed these data sets inside whatever projects or systems that we're building. But with AI coming along, we now have access to capabilities that we just didn't have previously. We had a great contribution that we can now do vibe coding. We can actually write programs that automate some of the tasks that we were previously doing. We can do feature extraction from drone imagery that we were capturing. You know, it's a capability that existed only in, you know, defense companies 10 years ago. Now I can do it with something I buy off Amazon. That's an incredible capability that exists and is given to us by these global technology companies. We have also, as a result of the way these systems operate, have all become cartographers ourselves. Whether that's explicit, in that we're adding contributions to OpenStreetMap, or implicit, because we're living our day-to-day lives and contributing probe data that tells people about speed limits, we have all become cartographers. We're all part of the process now that global technology companies have built around us. There is, though, a risk of over-reliance on these platforms. Because they set that basement, there's an expectation, perhaps a false expectation, that they will always be there and we will always have access to them. But we are dependent on business models of companies that we have no control over. We're also, if you like, in many ways, having to deal with the geopolitics of the world as it is today? And at what point do we stop using a map that causes the Gulf of Mexico to be the Gulf of America? Would that be a decision point for us? Because there's a particular worldview expressed in that system. At a technical level, we've all been forced to use Web Mercator because that's what all the global platforms use. And for this audience, you all know what that means and what some of the restrictions and things you need to be concerned about around that. But that was kind of forced upon us. We've had no question about that. And finally, on this kind of sovereignty control point around the global technology platforms, there's really interesting contributions from the defense and intelligence community. So, well, we've never been connected to the internet. We've never been reliant on these people. Maybe you can learn a lot from us, and maybe we can learn a lot from them. Thank you.